The city of Rosebridge had always shimmered in December, but this year it felt dimmer, quieter, as though the snow itself hesitated before falling, and that quietness pressed against the windows of a small, second-floor apartment where 7-year-old Lila Monroe sat at a wobbly kitchen table with her elbows tucked tight against her body to stay warm. Her mother, Erin, moved slowly around the small kitchen, wearing the same faded sweater she'd worn for the last 3 winters, pretending she wasn't exhausted, as she scraped instant oatmeal from an almost empty packet, stretching it into 2 bowls as though magic might make it multiply. Lila watched her mother's forced smile, the tightness at the corners of her eyes, and she felt something twist inside her chest. Not sadness exactly, but a wish so big she couldn't swallow it anymore. The wish that someone, anyone, would help her mother smile like she used to when Lila's father was alive. On the counter, half buried under unopened bills and a coil of frayed charger cables, sat a red envelope with glitter on the corners. An envelope. Lila had decorated herself because she had decided, with the absolute certainty only a child could have, that this year she would not send her Christmas letter to the North Pole. She had written it to someone she believed might actually read it. Santa at the corner office, Skycrest Corporation, 44 Silver Avenue, because she had heard her classmates talking about the company's CEO, a man whose charity work made him sound like someone who could fix any problem. Lila didn't know what a CEO did exactly, but the way adults said the word, quietly, respectfully, made her think it must be someone very powerful, someone who could help her mother breathe easy again. She had overheard 2 teachers whispering that the man, Daniel Harrington, had lost his wife 3 years ago and had thrown himself into work ever since, becoming both the most admired and the most unreachable man in Rosebridge. To Lila, that made him perfect. Someone who knew what sadness felt like, meaning he might understand hers. So gripping her pencil with mittened hands, she wrote him a letter that morning before school, pouring her small but enormous heart onto the page. Dear Santa at the corner office, my mom is the best mom in the world, but she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. I don't want toys this year. I want her to smile again. I want her to rest, and maybe help her pay the rent so we don't have to move again. Love, Lila. She didn't show her mother. She simply sealed it, pressed her little fingers around the edges like a spell, and slipped outside in her too thin coat to drop it into the blue postal box as snow began to drift in thin wisps. The letter traveled farther than she ever imagined, collected by a postal worker who chuckled at the address before tossing it into a bin, where it was found by a sorting clerk who recognized the Skycrest address and, amused, sent it through internal mail. Out of curiosity, the red envelope sparkling with dried glue was placed on a desk in the Skycrest headquarters amid reports, contracts, and quarterly reviews onto a desk belonging to none other than Daniel Harrington himself, who had returned late from a meeting, unbuttoning his coat with mechanical motions, unaware that the tiny envelope, sitting like a misplaced ornament, would soon disrupt every routine he had built around his loneliness. When he finally noticed it, resting on his keyboard like a challenge, he frowned, not in irritation but confusion, because no one sent him handwritten letters, and certainly not ones addressed to Santa at the corner office. Something in him, something he had buried since the night his wife died, softened as he opened it, expecting a prank, only to feel the breath leave his lungs as he read Lila's shaky handwriting. The words weren't polished, they weren't dramatic, but they hit him with the force of something painfully familiar. A child pleading for a parent who was drowning quietly. He saw flashes of himself, the months he had watched his late wife fading, the way he had tried to stay strong, the nights he had cried into the dark after the funeral when no one could hear him. He read the letter again, slower this time, and a heaviness spread across his chest, not of grief but of resolve, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Without hesitation, he called his assistant, Mara, who answered groggily, though she was still in the building. She hurried into his office where he sat holding the letter, like a fragile piece of truth. Find this child, he said, voice low, commanding but emotional in a way that startled her. Find her and her mother, today, Mara. Didn't ask questions. She had worked with Daniel long enough to recognize when something touched the part of him that still cared deeply beneath the stone walls he wrapped around himself. By noon the next day, she returned with a folder. Monroe, Erin, second-floor unit on Maple Street. Overdue rent notices, single mother, part-time cashier, widowed 2 years prior. Daniel absorbed the information with a growing ache in his throat, especially when he saw the photo of Lila from her school's winter newsletter, a small girl with bright eyes and a forced smile, looking so much like the version of himself he'd once wished someone would check on. He dismissed his meetings for the day, something he had never done in a decade, shocking his board. He didn't care. He grabbed his coat, the letter, and the determination that had carried him through every battle of his life since he was 18. Meanwhile, in the small apartment, Erin was folding laundry on the couch, unaware her world was about to shift. She had spent the morning convincing Lila that they would be okay, even though she had just received a final notice from their landlord. She told her daughter that life always found a way to surprise them, a lie she wished she believed. The afternoon light dimmed as footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and firm, stopping right outside their door. Erin froze, panic flashing across her face. Certain it was the landlord coming early, she wiped her hands on her sweater, bracing herself as the knock came, 3 deep. Steady taps that didn't sound like impatience but authority, confidence, presence. On the other side of the door stood a tall man in a dark coat dusted with snow, his expression serious but gentle, holding a red, glittery envelope in his hand like a message of fate. Erin opened the door halfway, ready to apologize, ready to beg for more time, until she looked up into the face she instantly recognized from newspapers, interviews, billboards. Daniel Harrington, CEO of Skycrest, the most powerful man in the city and the last person she expected to find outside her modest door. Lila, hearing her mother's sharp inhale, peeked from behind her leg, and her eyes widened in awe and confusion as Daniel knelt slightly to her height and extended the envelope. "I believe," he said softly, "this belongs to you." Erin's confusion turned to disbelief as her daughter's cheeks flushed pink. Lila nodded slowly, swallowing. Are you Santa at the corner office?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope so fragile Daniel felt it in his bones. He gave a small, warm smile, the first genuine one he had felt in years. "I don't know about Santa," he said, "but I got your letter. And I'm here because no child should have to ask for what you asked." Erin's knees nearly gave out as she realized what must have happened. Her daughter had written a letter she hadn't seen, a letter powerful enough to bring the CEO of Skycrest to their doorstep. Daniel straightened and met Erin's eyes, and the gravity of the moment settled around them like the thickening snowfall outside. "If you'll allow me," he said, with a tone both respectful and earnest, "I'd like to help." Erin's throat tightened, and with fear, gratitude, disbelief, she stammered, I don't understand. Why us? Why would you?" Daniel looked at Lila, then back at her mother with eyes that carried a sorrow he rarely let anyone see. "Because someone once helped me when I thought my world was falling apart," he answered quietly. "And because your daughter reminded me what it means to care." Snow whirled behind him like the city exhaled, and in that tiny apartment doorway, cramped, cold, and heavy with unspoken struggles, something shifted in the air, something that felt like the first flicker of hope in a long time, a hope strong enough to pull 2 broken families toward a destiny they never expected but desperately needed. And as Erin stepped aside to let him in, unaware of how deeply this stranger would change everything, Lila whispered a small, breathless promise to herself. If he's here, maybe Christmas magic is real. And somewhere inside Daniel, a long sealed part of his heart cracked open, letting warmth in for the first time in years, as if answering her belief. And this unexpected knock, this crossing of paths born from a child's letter, was only the beginning of a story that would test them, heal them, bind them, and teach them all that sometimes. The greatest miracles come disguised as ordinary people with broken hearts, trying their best to do something kind. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that touch your heart and keep you wanting more. Daniel stepped inside the small apartment, feeling the warmth of the room struggling against the winter cold, but also sensing something else, a quiet resilience woven into every corner of the home. Erin tried to straighten the place in a rush, embarrassed by the peeling paint and mismatched furniture, but Daniel gently stopped her with a calm shake of his head, his gaze softening as he surveyed the signs. of a mother doing everything she could with what little she had. Lila sat on the couch clutching the red envelope like a treasure, watching Daniel with wide, curious eyes, and for a moment he saw in her the bravery of a child willing to ask for help when adults forgot how. He took a seat across from them and placed a small folder on the table. Erin's breath caught when she saw the Skycrest insignia on the cover. "I want to offer you something," Daniel began, choosing his words carefully. "A chance to start again. Stable housing, full-time employment at Skycrest. Something you're more than qualified for. And whatever support Lila needs to feel safe." Erin's hand trembled on her knee. She had dreamed of opportunities like this, but never believed they would find her. "Why?" she whispered. Daniel's shoulders lowered, the weight of his own past settling behind his eyes. "Because someone once lifted me when I couldn't stand on my own," he said softly. "And because no child should have to worry about losing their home at Christmas." Lila reached out and touched his sleeve with small, grateful fingers, and the simple gesture nearly broke him open. Erin wiped a tear, nodding slowly as hope, real, unfamiliar, overwhelming, rose inside her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Daniel stood to leave, promising to return the next day with paperwork and arrangements. But before he stepped out, Lila ran to him and hugged his leg tightly. He froze, moved in a way he hadn't been since his wife's passing, then knelt to hug her back with a gentleness that surprised even him. As he walked down the hallway, he realized something profound. He hadn't just answered a letter, he had stepped into a new chapter of his own life. And for the first time in years, he felt the possibility of healing. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, powerful stories that stay with you long after the last line.